So I guess that kind of leaves what I'm supposed to do. So the 240 gallon. I mean, that's kind of the concept that I came to you with, Mac, about the idea of having ants and frogs, and kind of carrying that stuff all over together. So what part can I explain? Because I've talked about it, and I'm guilty of ranting about it. So I'm going to try this from different approaches here. Like, what can I explain that would be interesting for you that maybe you're not aware of about the tank?
And do you think
Yeah,
that having an ant component is a thing that's going to happen, or is that just not realistic now?
Well, Mac has been growing the colony for me. Do you want to maybe explain a little bit about that?
yeah. So, I mean, the colony probably right now they're of course in a pre-diapause. And they're coming up on their rest period now. They will be in there for another couple months, and I think by the time they come out of diapause, they'll be in your hands. So they'll grow a lot in this next year. You can expect to see probably a good 500 to 1,000 workers in that time period. That to me is about the time period when you could start doing something with, just thinking in terms of the natural loss of a colony. It's a mathematical problem. Like, ants have to grow faster than they lose members to achieve that stage of maturity where they can actually propagate the species by producing elates. So you're going to have to figure out at what point, how many of these workers can you take. I would probably wait until you have the brood pile in front of you, say, early spring, and you can kind of count them. You'll say, okay, there's a couple hundred, there's 300. That'll give you an idea of how many ants you might want to risk taking from them, or letting out into your enclosure where they might be part of the natural food for those animals. I mean, they're going to lose. Ants are going to lose members naturally. So, and I know from keeping these ants, we were talking earlier, I can't feed them as fast as they want food sometimes, especially a bigger colony. So you're going to lose some regardless. So, I mean, I don't think everybody in the ant keeping hobby is going to be excited about the idea of feeding their pet ants to other animals, but this is just kind of an extension of the hobby. I think this is a really neat way to involve your ant colonies, especially colonies that get too big. So it's definitely a good way to mitigate some of the dangers of overpopulation. This is what we're talking about. Do you want to call a colony? Do you want to kill some of them and freeze them, or do you want to have some kind of other cool pets that you can evolve and actually provide them some benefit? Because I think I'm not 100% certain with frogs, but don't they need some of the nutrition that ants provide? Isn't that sort of part of their natural diet?
Yeah, real
It's
quick.
not currently something that there's a lot of uh like demand for, I guess, or like that's currently being cultured, but there's definitely plenty of ants that are in the natural diets of probably most species. They're just such a universal group of insect. Some kinds of frogs probably consume more than others. I know there's a particular species that we work with here at Josh's that gut studies have found that they eat a lot of arboreal ants and stuff like that, the tree frogs. And so I was had that thought it would be really cool if we had some kind of way to do an ant colony to feed them. But I don't know if that's ever going to happen, or like Aaron, you've had the thought about like carpenter ants or whatever for your critters before, that it sounds like you're getting closer to making a reality.
I can answer this with Mac. American toads and wood frogs. Like I said, I mean that's the primary predator of them in the wild, whether it be carpenter ants or say the name one more time. Formica what?
Subsericia.
Subsericia. It's a hard one for me to remember. I don't know why. They go by
That's
the
that's one that's one of the harder ones. Yeah.
yeah, they go by the black field ant, right? Isn't that their
Hmm.
common name?
Yeah.
Subsericia or the black field ant. But anyway, uh, yeah. So I don't know if they identified which ant. It could be both, but I would assume it's probably both in the diet. I don't think there is like, I don't know. I guess I can ask you this as being more educated in the space. If you go to a woodland, do you think you'd find more of the Subsericia, or do you think you'd find more of the carpenter ants, or what do you think you like? Do you think it'd be a good mix?
Yeah, it depends on the habitat. So like, just for example, here, and also the time of year, each species kind of has a peak season, so mid-July, you're going to see lots of Formica subsericia just everywhere, all because there's actually raids going on from some of the slave makers or slave ants that kind of raid their colonies. So you're just seeing lots of activity around everywhere that they are, especially in those areas where there's other species they're interacting with. So then you carpenter ants, they're super duper active around April, May, June, earlier, and you'll see them just going up and down, eating lots of aphids, honeydew, and they're coming down from these trees so full they can barely even walk back to their nest. Sometimes I'm just envisioning that's like a huge target for some of these frogs. Like, oh my gosh, look at all that big juicy ant that's got all that sweet nectar inside of it. Ants eat a lot of aphids honeydew generally, so that's probably going to be a big part of the same type of diet. You know, if they're eating ants, they're probably going to be eating the same nutrients that an ant is eating primarily. So that's pretty neat.
The diet of American toads and wood frogs are either carpenter ants or black field ants, and I mean that's a big part of their diet. We weren't really sure. I mean, he broke down like what time of the year you would expect to see them and being a prey item. So I mean, they both inhabit, like the carpenter ant and the black field ant, they both inhabit the same fields, right? Or like the same woodlands.
They do, yeah. I mean, there's the primary habitat that I check. I mean, you'll see 3 different species of large carpenter ants and Formica subsericia. Those are kind of the dominant ants of that area.
So the
Um,
Subsericia is the dominant ant in the woods.
no, it depends on where those woods are. If they're closer to like a field area, where there's bigger colonies of them, you'll have a heavier population around the wooded areas. But as you get deeper and deeper into the dense forests, like especially when we're on hiking, you start to see primarily carpenter ants everywhere. So there's fewer field ants. It seems they like to be near open areas like fields and parking lots and buildings. But like, when we go up into the Smoky Mountains, I mean, you're seeing just carpenter ants for miles. Like you don't see anything else. So yeah,
I don't
it's gonna
remember
vary a lot.
I don't remember if you said which species is it that you're looking to be keeping, Aaron?
So it's the one he's been talking about the most, the Formica subsericia. I said it right
Okay,
that
that's
time, I
what I
think.
thought.
I tried with the carpenter ants, but I found that it was a little bit more challenging for their diet. So I lost the colony because I didn't understand the diet of carpenter ants as much at the time. But the reason why I went with the subsericia is because they can eat, like, of course, gnats and what is it, the fruit flies, but also I could give them dead crickets, I could give them dead roaches and whatever, and they'll eat it, which is more up my alley to like supply that kind of stuff. Of course, like, the water and sugar, like sugar water and the honey as well. So I think we'd have to see if so here's kind of my idea is he's building a special habitat that we're going to have on the top of the big tank. Can't use my hands, I forgot. So it's going to be on the top of the big tank, and then I'm going to have a tube that's going to go from that habitat into the tank, and a handful will drop into the tank, and I'll close it up and seal it so then no more ants can get out. And we'll, like the calling idea of like getting rid of a handful but holding on to the majority, and trying to figure that out from a good research perspective, how many that would, how many it would be best to get rid of. I would like to have even a holding area. I don't know if it's possible, but it'd be awesome to have a holding area and to just feed those ants that are stuck in that holding area. Give them like 15 minutes, like let them eat the gut load that I let the crickets eat and
Yeah,
stuff, to see if they would even taste it. Like maybe the ants would try it if they saw it. It's like a
load them
powder.
up with that better bug.
Yeah, just to see if they would eat it. And if not, the honey itself, I mean, that wouldn't be the best. It would be good, but it wouldn't be the best thing for them. I mean, you could feed the ants apples and stuff and different things as well. I think fruit is a good additional piece, like a smaller piece of the diet. That's what I'm starting to find in dubia roaches is like the gut load plus fruit seems to be like a good combination for healthy frogs, but that's not cited. I'm not going off of any like literature for the fruit. It's just from my observation that I started experimenting with. But anyway, I would like to play around with that kind of stuff and then let the ants fall into the tank, let the frogs and toads catch them, and kind of repeat that cycle. But make sure that we're prioritizing the ants as pets first. I know there was some ideas that I was going to possibly keep them in the tank, but having 6 animals in the tank, I don't think would be beneficial to the ants. I think they'd get picked off, and you got to think of the stress it would bring on the queen ant that's trying to, establish her colony. If it was the size of my room, like if it was like a 10 by 10 or something, or a 20 by 20, yeah, I'd probably consider letting the ants live in there once their colony got to a few thousand. But no, I don't really, I don't plan on having them live together. I've seen that. Like, Mac, have you seen people have these like mixed enclosures with frogs and ants or multiple ant colonies and other insects? Like, what are your thoughts when you see that kind of stuff?
Um, so this is coming from the perspective of somebody who barely understands one type of pet, and that's ants. It's hard enough to dial in one ant species with your habitat, your food, your heat, your humidity, all the things that change throughout the year. It's hard to do that with one type of ant. So when you introduce another completely different type of animal, the possibilities of what could go wrong just multiply, and it gets larger and larger with each additional one you introduce. Like, so for ant colonies, for example, mites are a really big enemy at times. Not all mites, but there are some that can really damage the colony. Um, and so some of those mites are really hard to keep out of like terrariums. Those are just natural habitats for them, living in the soil, living with certain animals. Could be frogs, could be lizards, toads, whatever else people want to use that they keep as pets in their house. So my initial reaction is no way, not doing it, not going there. I mean, that's even with other insects. So, but when you start to combine the knowledge of people who have kept ants, and now you guys are very good with keeping frogs, you've been doing that for a number of years. I think that's worthwhile to discuss and kind of tackle some of the problems ahead of time, and then it's worth to try to experiment with in a smart, educated way.
Yeah,
How do you deal with those mites if you get a problem? How do you troubleshoot that?
Um, it comes up as a fear more than it comes up as a real problem. I've very rarely seen it like, my colony is dying of mites. It happens once or twice a year where you see it as a legit issue, like somebody has put their ants or something near them that contains these kind of mites, and then they've migrated to the ant colony, or the ants have moved into somewhere that these mites live in. When you have it already happening, there's rumored ways to deal with it, like lemon juice. You can provide the ants some lemon juice, and they can use it as kind of a natural agent to help themselves get rid of the mites on their bodies and around the colonies. I've heard mixed results with that. My one experience with soil mites, now I say soil mites because I'm not sure, I'm not a mite expert, but when I've collected ants out in the wild, and this was a fungus ant called Trachymermex septentrionalis. So they're so similar to leafcutter ants in a lot of ways, but they're very different. They're very small. Colonies stay really small. They live here in North Carolina. They're probably in Pennsylvania and other areas of the eastern United States. So super duper neat ants, but when you collect them, you really have to dig up their pile of fungus, which is attached to the soil in a lot of cases. So when I've collected them in the past, you'll inevitably end up with the mites that you feel like these are more borderline, the ones that could really harm your ant colonies. And so in order to deal with those, I've kind of baited them out with like pieces of cricket, other foods that they seem to latch onto and feed from. And then when I see a bunch of them, I'll take that and put it in the freezer. And so you just kind of deal with them in a way that makes sense, based on what you see. Cut their population down to a minimum. I think one time I have seen them on a queen. This is a very, very small ant species. And in that case, it actually killed the queen. So you just have to try to do things that you think might help, like feeding them other foods. They're obviously not eating the ants, but they're going to eat the brood in some cases. So that would turn into food. So if you can bait them out of the colony at certain times and cut them down to fewer and fewer, hopefully you'll win the battle in some way. Yeah, I'm not really sure that what ants have in store for mites in the natural world. I'm sure there's some research on that, but there's also grain mites, which you get in cultures of some kind of feeder insects, and they're really, really tiny, little green, yellowish, small bugs you'll see crawling on the surfaces of whatever your cultures are. Those I've never really felt like cause problems for my ant colonies because I've been using them. Those same fruit flies is one of them. And I've used the same kind of cultures from the same people again and again and again. And I've been doing this, like I said, I've got one colony that's 12 years old. Our carpenter ant colony is turning 9. So obviously there's no long-term problems with the grain mites. So it's kind of like a scarier thing than it is an actual reality of being something that will always cause problems for you as an ant keeper. But I think it's always in the back of people's heads.
So I have a couple of questions here. So you said I'll start with the vision first and work my way around. So this is a more interesting question here. This is going to be kind of fun to ask you. So I don't think we ever had this conversation yet. I didn't really know that their eyesight was that great, like for that species. So do you think that, I'm just going to call them the black-filled ant right now because, again, the name is getting me, but do you think that they would be a tougher ant for the frogs to catch? And like even in the tank, it's like a 6.5, like 80 inches. I mean, do you think that it's going to give them their money's worth, or do you think they'll be able to just snipe them out?
No, I think frogs are naturally ants are not that patient. I'm going to sit here all day animal. Like a frog is going to sit there that's a predator. Ants are not predators. Not most of them. I mean, they're mostly ants are scavengers, so they're just going out there foraging for food, and they're good at that. These are the only ants that I've come across in my travels that I know that when I walk by them with a brighter colored shirt, that I see less of them. So I wear darker colored shirts. So yeah, I mean, their eyesight is really good and it serves them well, but you're not going to have these little frogs jumping around, giving them any kind of warning signs. They're the ones that are going to get caught, pretty sure.
Well, you might be surprised in that, because especially the wood frogs, how quick they are. And then Ace, and I'm not sure what other toads do this. So frogs and toads sometimes they have different personalities. One of the big things I want to break in the hobby, at least, is people always say about how lazy toads are, and that's not actually always true. It seems like it's maybe the males who are a little bit more lazy than the females, but even
My
so, like,
male is very lazy.
yeah, I think that some males will hunt, but female toads hunt. Like American toad females, I don't have one that doesn't hunt. So they're gonna chase them. I know what's gonna happen. They're gonna look. It probably will be the wood frogs. Honestly, Esther, the female wood frog that's hanging out with me here, she's probably gonna be the first to see it, and I think she'll catch them because like pond frogs are so quick. So I think she'll get one. But if you're asking like for a unique shot of Ace catching one, I think it's going to challenge her. I think it's going to challenge all the toads because, except the males, because if they do just happen to sit there and wait, it's kind of, it'd be kind of like going to get minnows in a stream. You got people down there with the nets, and then you've got people like kind of kicking the rocks to get the minnows to come down. Well, that in a way, that's accidentally what the females would be doing. They'd be causing chaos and allowing the males to sit there and probably pick them off.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it's going to work. Yeah, I hope you do some good videos of it. Not that I want to see ants die. I don't want everybody to get that, but just this it's a curious natural interaction that there's lots of people who do YouTube videos of they feed unnecessarily feed items to ant
Oh
colonies,
yeah.
especially that are not prey. I mean, ants are not the kind of ants that go out and take down a huge spider or I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff like that. People will try to feed like a 20-inch centipede or millipede or something. I mean, these are just not natural, and it's pretty unethical in my opinion. Not trying to call anybody out because there's just so many of them. It's not one that sticks in my head. But those kind of things that it don't interest me. But this is something that happens in the wild a lot. Yeah, I mean, why not learn about it?
Yeah, I think this is cool because it gives a natural snapshot of something that does happen every day in the wild from like, maybe the late spring to summer in people's backyards and also in woodlands all around the Northeast and even in the Southeast where these animals meet, where these creatures meet up. Another question I had was you said that your ant, the queen ant, is like you said 13 or 12?
At the subspecies, she's 12. Yeah, she's going to be 13 next season.
So, what is the usual lifespan that you've seen of ants in captivity, especially that species?
So that's the longest lived one that I know of, in people that I know. There could be one or two people that have been keeping ants longer than I have. I don't know that they have had colonies that have lived that long. Um, the only other research I can speak of that I know that somebody studied would be a colony in Germany, a queen in Germany. This was Lasius. I want to say Niger. I could be wrong on the species, but I think that one lived 40 years.
Wow.
So that's the potential for an ant queen. And of course, I'm sure they live longer in some cases. That could have been a premature exit for that queen. You'll come across if you Google what's the life expectancy of a queen ant, you're going to get a lot of bad answers. I would say just a general estimation. Not all ants are going to live the same. Anywhere from 15 to 25 to 30 years would be a good average, with exceptions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the reason why I wanted a colony like this. And I had seen some varying differences in terms of age. Like some people would claim only 3 to 5, some people say 15. But I had seen stuff very rarely pop up about it being longer. Pretty much as long as you can keep them alive is how long they'll live for the most part. And that's kind of the same way with American toads. But, if you Google the lifespan of a wood frog, it doesn't come out to be very good either. A lot of the sources that I found, even experts, all claim that they make it 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years. They don't usually live that long. And there's no way necessarily of knowing how old Esther really is, but from her size and from how long I've had her, I do think she's around 5 or 6. But I don't think she's ever looked any better than right now. She's at her peak. So I don't know. I've never seen online ever. Like, you can Google it, you can look for it as deep as you want, and tell me if you do find it, because I want to know what they did. I don't think anybody's ever kept a wood frog alive for that long. Uh, I haven't had her the whole 6. I had her for like 3, but going on 4. But still, even when I had my other male wood frog before he passed, I've been very fortunate because of the air conditioning and the climate control to be able to keep. I mean, that's why I got a climate controlled room, was to keep wood frogs. It wasn't for the toads, really. It was for the wood frogs. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to know. I know that's a conversation we had too, because I have a climate controlled room. It's a cooler room. You know, how do the ants fare in that kind of a condition? And we said I'd need to get like some type of a heating unit, at least during the day, for the ants. So I mean, that's something that's real as well that I'm looking into. What do you like? How do you feel about like an under tank heater? If you'd put your one of your um, housing units on top of that, would you recommend that, or do you think it's a little bit risky?
As long as it's not directly under the water source, yeah, that's great. So you want to do a gradient. So if you have an 8-inch wide habitat and you keep the left side maybe 2 inches or under that's a really good way to kind of provide the gradient, as long as you got a water source on the right side where it's cool, and then dry heat on the left side, and then the warmer humidity is like right there in the dead center. So yeah, I think that can work really well. Heat cables are tough. I'm a big fan of heat lamps when they heat a whole area. Um, but yeah, not a lot of people these days want to have the big giant lamps take up a lot of room, and that seems to cause people worry that they're going to get too hot or something.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is because I'm thinking of a way that I can have on the same shelf. So not only are ants going to be a part of the diet in this tank and a component, but so are canyon isopods, and I go nuts about those too. I know they're not native to Pennsylvania, but they're native to the Southwest, and uh, frogs and toads love to eat them. But they're one of my favorite isopods. But anyway, they need a little bit warmer conditions as well if you're going to breed them. So I'm thinking about the possibility of having a smaller under tank heater and having like maybe the nest of the ants, like the field ants, on the heater and the water off of it, and then having maybe the canyon isopods as well on the heater, so that way they get the chance to stay warm as well. I have them on one now, but like that's what I'm hoping, is I can share a heater between the two of them.
Was your
Sounds
tank
easy.
front opening or top opening? Because it sounds like it's going to be a challenge to get into it if it's top opening. You're putting all these bugs on it.
Yeah, it's top opening.
How fun
uh,
is that?
well, yeah, there's multiple ways that I have to look to see. I mean, maybe they get their own shelf, maybe they get their own stand. There's a lot of options. I'm not opposing anything. I know at some point the ants are going to get big enough that they're going to need, something along the size of an aquarium, at some point. Um, for a size of, I guess for a sense of scale, Mac, how big is the enclosure that is coming with the ants that I'm going to have?
The enclosure is 8 inches wide, 4 inches tall, and it's 4 inches deep. So you'll, like I said, I probably would do the left, for example, the left 2 inches, put the heating pad under that, and then you have to adjust it, a little bit. So you'll go ahead and get everything set up. Use room temperature bottled water, put it in the water towers on the right side, and then give it a day, 2 days, because there's natural changes of temperature and heat in our house that could create some humidity at certain times. That's the enemy of an ant keeper to an extent, because what happens is the ants start to put trash up on that moisture that builds up, and then you can't see them anymore. So if you can just kind of watch it for a couple of days before you start to move your ants in, go ahead and just try to get everything in a perfect setting, no condensation, the heat's on, the water's all filled like you want it, then you go ahead and start moving your ants in. So
So the other thing that's really good to know. What should I prioritize? I guess it's a loaded question. What should I prioritize as like the additional feeders outside of like the sugar, water, and honey? Like what feeders can I use? And then what can I use as a border? I know you have, is it Fluon or something? Is that the only?
well, yeah, that's what we carry as a barrier. Um, to me, that's the best one. There's other people who, and it depends on where you live. So Fluon here is, I would say, if you go any further south or anywhere in the tropics where it's just constantly really humid, the Fluon's probably not your best answer. There may be something else out there that you can work with that's going to be better. Fluon works great when it's dry.
What
It
is
works
Fluon? Is it like a
it's
latex or something?
it's a liquid Teflon, if
Teflon.
that makes sense. Yeah. So you
Hmm.
apply it as a liquid. It dries really fast onto a surface like plastic and glass. I've heard people use it on smooth metals, but once it dries, it's supposed to be really effective at keeping ants and other insects from crawling up it. It's used on some. This is a long time ago. I was scared to death. I had bed bugs at one point. This was years ago, and I bought these little stands for your bed that put under the bedposts, and they had little coating of Fluon on it. So there's all kinds of uses for it, but laboratories use it. A lot of research labs use it heavily. Anywhere from like mosquito control, ants is a very popular one. I never heard of it being used outside of insects, so I'm pretty sure it's just for insects. But once it's applied, it's really effective. It lasts for a good while. Like you can get a couple of months, maybe longer if the room you're using it in is really dry. Now, if it's humid, I would say a threshold level 40-45% humidity and above, you're going to have some failure. You're going to see ants crawling over it without any concern that it's even there. So you're going to, then there is some other ways that I'm starting to work with and kind of working myself into understanding. As far as ants are concerned, you can build habitats, they're feeding habitats in ways to help you control them from escaping when you're dealing with bigger populations of ants. But as far as barriers go, I think Fluon's really the only commercially sold one. There's other techniques like baby powder you can try. I think people will dump a certain amount of baby powder in water or alcohol and then apply that solution. And then once it evaporates, it leaves a layer of baby powder. I've heard that works pretty good for some people, but I've never tried it.
Yeah, I'll have to figure that part out.
Yeah, because it sounds like you're going to be into the more humid category, probably.
Somewhere between 40 and 60. It's going to depend. It's going to vary
Hmm.
because there is a humidifier in here all year. But like I said, I mean, there's times that we'll get into the 30s, but the majority is it's 40 and above, like 40 to 50.
Hmm. And it may not matter. Like you can keep your you'd be surprised how well I mean, I'm sure you know this, you can control the humidity in small spaces in a room pretty well. Like you have a small dehumidifier in this corner, and it controls the humidity like well below what it is on the other side of the room. So you can work with it, I'm sure, to make it manage. If you're not introducing your main ant colony into the same tank that you're feeding the actual ants, I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to manage some kind of separation there.
Yeah, it gives me a lot of good information. Now, what kind of feeders? Now, I guess I'm talking about like dead crickets and dead roaches. Mostly it's probably going to be crickets. Um, what are your thoughts? I don't really plan on feeding live to them, but are they going to be capable of taking on a dead, say, a medium-sized dubia roach or a large banded cricket?
Yeah, Formica subcericea are really good hunters because of their eyesight. They're so just relaying a couple of things I've seen in the wild. There's a huge colony not too far from here under a flagpole. One night I saw a large flight of Camponotus castaneus. Those are really big carpenter ants, and the males are pretty big, bigger than pretty much all the worker ants I can think of. So these are large insects, and the workers were picking them off as soon as they landed on the ground and just pulling them right down inside. I mean, their eyesight was so good that they were literally just grabbing a leg and just dragging one at a time, dragging these little males back down into their nest. So yeah, they're super good at using their eyesight to their advantage. So yeah, I feel like feeding them live, you'll be okay with smaller insects like fruit flies, small crickets. They definitely could. I'm not a big fan of feeding live insects other than fruit flies, just because it is such a long, torturous process for the
That's how I
feeder
feel about
insects.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not necessary. I just like mealworms. If I feed those, usually pinch the heads, cut the heads off, cut them in 3 pieces. Same thing with crickets. I'll break them into 4 pieces and pinch their heads. I don't freeze them like some people do. Um, and there may be a good reason to do that with some ants, but the receptivity of the food when you freeze them drops a lot, if not completely, with some ants. So most worker ants, I only know of one instance that the information's been relayed to me that some worker ants can eat solids. Most of them only eat liquid foods. So when you're feeding your ants feeder insects, you kind of keep that in mind. Crickets are going to be at the bottom of the list because they're really kind of gummy interior. They're going to get some food out of that, but not a ton. And then dubia roaches are like at the high end of the list, along with fruit flies, because if you get into the bellies of them, they're just really gooey. Mealworms are pretty high up there. A superworm, that is like a 2 to 3 inch long, kind of looking like a mealworm. It's a different type of mealworm or worm, but those are really fleshy. So again, those are kind of down at the bottom. You just kind of pick your feeder insects based on how gooey they are. Just know that the ones I use mostly for them is fruit flies, and dubia roaches are a great second choice. So
That's
So are
really
they
good.
not as not as big on stuff that's been frozen because it kind of decreases the water content? And does that also go for like if you were using a plant material for an omnivorous species, that they wouldn't be as big on something that was frozen thawed? They'd want you to be giving them fresh fruits or veggies or fungus whenever possible.
yeah, it's either the water content. I mean, this is guess. I've never read anything that specifically says we've studied this and this is what I found. But having done this for long enough with different ants, to me, it's got to be the water content that's being taken out when you freeze something that makes it less receptive, or some nutrient that is present in that moisture and that water content that disappears when it is dried out. So, you know, ants can get water from a variety of ways. When I feed them, they'll get apple slices and they constantly have water. So, do I feel like they're going directly up to them and getting just the water? That's what they want. No, there's some kind of nutrient in there that they want. Usually like fruit flies, that's it's whatever's in their gut. It's that nasty looking material at the bottom that smells bad. And I think dubia roaches probably eat something very similar. That's a similar concoction of smelly nutrients. That's for both of them, because equally, carpenter ants do well on both of them, and they're particular. Like I think Aaron mentioned before, it's harder they're a hard ant to kind of master as far as their diet. So those seem to be two feeder insects that are becoming universal for me with all my ant colonies as far as feeding.
The reason why I brought up about blueberries and cranberries and even raspberries is because those are, in terms of what I keep and in terms of where they're at, where they live. I mean, apple trees are present too in some of the habitats, but realistically, the blueberries are what I think they would be after the most. Now, you can go to the grocery store and pick them up. I don't think you could actually sustainably keep a native blueberry bush. I'm trying this as I'm saying this, but
and some of the ones that would be on the ground were probably the ripe ones that fell from the tree, right?
yeah,
If that
well,
makes
they could
sense.
even go up and eat them on the tree. I see ants going
Mhm.
up apple trees, and it'd be no different from a blueberry bush. I just look at it in terms of like the berries. You know, how many creatures in the wild in Michigan and North Carolina and Pennsylvania, how many ants are eating berries because they're just one of the most abundant foods out in the woods. And then, you know, on their way back to the colony, they're getting pegged off by frogs and toads. But um, no, I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting though about like fruit. I would be interested to hear what your thoughts were if you would offer, like, I don't know if you can even get a hold of cranberries, uh, but cranberries and blueberries and see if they'd take them.
I mean, I'll try.
Because
I'll try.
I'm actually trying to grow that in the tank. Like the goal
Cranberries
is
are awfully bitter. I don't know if they'd go for it if they really like sweet things.
Mhm.
it's a good food source of a lot of antioxidants, and I know the ants don't care about that, but it seems like it would provide them some energy, and it would be a natural. It depends on how far you pull this out. I don't want to get too like conspiracy theorists with this, but I'm thinking if it's a native species and you're feeding like native cranberries, maybe they recognize it somehow, like their species is, I don't know, like maybe there's some type of association and we don't know that yet, or we haven't figured that out. I don't know, maybe it's not, maybe they're just generalists and it doesn't matter. But if they do have some type of a preference towards native stuff and you provide like cranberries, it'd just be interesting to see what happens with that. You know, maybe
Mhm.
they do like exotic berries better or fruits, but I just would be interested to see like what, like cranberries more so than anything. I mean, that's like a staple in Pennsylvania. You can find
Mhm.
cranberries in a lot of places in the woods, like near wooded
Yeah,
areas.
I could see like with ants, ants have seasons. The ants will come out and start foraging early spring and stop, late summer, early fall. They continue to some extent, but the flowering plants have a season when the flowers open up, and then the fruits the same thing when they develop and grow on the trees. So all that's got to match up, like, is this a primary food, like, or is it more of just like they're foraging because these berries are just available right now? So that's something to think about too.
Now, right now, I don't know if it's the same with you guys, but cranberries are actually on the plants right now. Like they're late. Did you guys know that they come out late season? They're actually fall. Like
Mhm.
cranberry, the fruit of a cranberry is actually harvested in the wild in the fall. Like if you go and
Yes,
Yeah,
find,
frogs
lots.
and cranberries. It must be
Yeah,
fall.
yeah, lots of berries are. We're seeing lots of berries around here too on our walks recently. So that's cool.
yeah, we're hoping to really push that and get people interested and bring you up as well, like to get people to see your group. And if you, like I said, if you want to run ads or you want to run stuff on the Frog and Toad Facebook group, even if it's your newsletter, like if you want to do your annual newsletter and send that out,
I'll start doing it again. Yeah, we need to share stuff back and forth because I'm sure there's people in ants, ant keeping. Because like anytime you get involved in a new pet, usually it's your first foray into pets, like exotic pets. So it's kind of like you just don't know what you're missing. So if there's an opportunity for you want to share some stuff in the group, and yeah, by all means, please do.
definitely the 240 plus when that comes out. Yeah, I'll definitely be sharing about that because your ants will be on it.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome. I can't wait to see it.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode, guys. But thanks again for joining us. I can't wait to have Mack come back on the podcast. And thanks, Amelia and Josh as
Thank
well. But yeah, we'll catch up with you guys soon.
Yeah, it's nice to meet both of you. Really
Yeah, you
appreciate the
too.
time.